we do have, and I'll introduce him on the show, but we're experimenting with a third kind of behind the scenes host here named Chad. If you want to say hi, Chad, he's got a golden voice over there. But
hello, Dawnyel.
It does have a golden voice.
Isn't that amazing? Right? It's amazing. So we bring him on mainly for that there, and he puts on a little show there. He's showing out a little bit, but his voice is normally really high and squeaky, but he's showing out.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I love it. So anyway, if you hear this voice that comes from, maybe I should mouth it so it looks like it's coming from me, but it's actually that would be funny. But yeah, so if you hear Chad, that's Chad. Chad, you want to put your hand in there, wave and say hi or anything? So that's Chad's hand. So just so it doesn't spook you or creep you out.
I can see you. You can't see me.
So
it's getting creepier by the second.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, guys.
Yeah, you're going to be called Chad the Creeper from now on.
Right? Oh, maybe that's it. Creeper Chad.
Or the Orange Mike Creeper.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pumped you're here hanging out with us in the VIP podcast. And again, I love, being here in studio and not on Zoom. It's so much fun to be here, and the energy of the room and the energy of you guys, I could feel it. The listeners out there, thank you so much. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for hanging out with us here. Hit the subscribe button. I saw a stat the other day that like 90% of you guys are not subscribers that are watching us. So hit the button if you're watching right now. It'd be so awesome. We have a great guest on today. I'm using my hands a lot today, Sid. I don't know what's going on.
You're wired, man. Well, it's funny. Normally people eat lunch and then they hit like a low.
Right.
Heath eats lunch and then it's like a high.
Right.
I'm like, dude, I just ate a sandwich. I'm ready to take a nap. He's like, all right, let's go. I'm pumped. I got the energy.
So we're ready to go. I'm talking with my hands a lot. I'm getting into it. I'm showing out for you, Dawnyel. So we got a great guest on today. A lot of you may know her. And I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. Mm-hmm. And Sid and I'm being real honest, we were fighting over who was going to get the intro. And
yeah, don't steal my thunder here. I feel it. I feel you coming on trying to take on the intro.
So obviously Sid won. So I won't even say her name then. How about that? So you go ahead. Get after it. So Sid, introduce our guest.
Guys, ladies, gentlemen, dudes, I am so excited to introduce the one and only Dawnyel Smink. President of the Western Region at Keystone Insurers Group and founder of WISE, which stands for Women in Insurance Sharing Empowerment. I have a little bio that I wrote for Dawnyel here, but before I do, I actually got the pleasure of speaking at WISE, and I got to spend a little time with Dawnyel, learned about her story. This bio does not do it justice. If you have a few minutes to just sit down and talk with her, she has this ability to connect. I think when she stares into your eyes and listens, it is the most active listening that I've ever felt. She just gets people. So just one of the best humans that I've ever had the pleasure of coming across. I'm so glad that our paths, met. And let me read a little bio so you get a backstory here. But I'll turn it over to Dawnyel in a sec to give her own version, which will again be much better than mine. All right, Dawnyel Smink has an incredible history in the industry. She kicked her career off by founding a scratch agency. And by the way, this was during a time when I don't think there were a lot of female agency owners. She was really one of the first, and just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart to her for paving the way for people like me. She built that scratch agency up to a multi-million-dollar agency with a team of 20. Whew. She has served on multiple boards, councils, and advisory committees, including the Hartford Small Commercial Agency Council, the State Auto Insurance Board, Make-A-Wish Arizona Council, the Main Street America Group Regional Council, and Compass Insurance Regional Council, the Big I Arizona Board, the Travelers Regional Council, MetLife Board, and of course, as the founder of WISE. I think it's safe to say she may be the most networked lady in insurance. She is a fierce advocate for the independent channel and the empowerment of women in the industry, and she recently joined the Keystone Insurers Group, leading their strategy in the Western region, which I know she'll share more about today. So without further ado, Dawnyel, how are you?
I'm awesome, and it does my heart well that you say that about looking into my eyes, because I feel that connection every time I talk with both of you, and I just feel like there's just a genuineness to each of you. So this is going to be so much fun. I was so pumped knowing
yes.
today I was going to be doing this with you. So thank you so much for having the opportunity, to have a conversation, because you two are just shining people. Like there's like an aura and glow about both of you.
Oh, thank you.
Jeez,
Thank you.
don't stroke his
I
ego
know.
too
I
much.
was about to say the same about you. Again, dang it. Awesome. Is there anything that she missed? That was a great intro.
Thank you.
A great
Well,
intro.
I had
Anything
to.
she missed or anything that you wanted to highlight a little bit about that?
First, I will say that if
Chad.
there was anything she missed, like it would take the whole podcast, I think, to
Right.
read them all out. So
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yes.
that's Orange Mike Chad over there in the corner, or as Dawnyel called him, Creepy Chad in the corner. So love it. Hopefully that won't stick, because that would suck for you, Chad. But if it does stick, we got
Sorry, Chad.
Creepy Chad in the corner.
yeah, creepy
But
cat.
anyhow, I would love for you to expand on any of that, or expand. I don't know the word, but anyhow,
I would take us back to day one of starting an agency in a time when like there weren't a lot of role models to look up to.
yeah, the Rosie the Riveter of insurance. I love it.
Hey, we've used that at CLI before.
I
too,
have you. There you
Rosie.
go.
Oh yeah, we have T-shirts made up of Rosie.
That's awesome.
So
You have
yeah,
my
I was
keychain of Rosie
captive
the Riveter.
beforehand, and very cool.
Yeah.
And when I went independent, I really wanted to do commercial insurance. So not only was I a female agency owner starting scratch and leaving the captive world, I was also a commercial lines focused agency owner, which put me in a totally different segment. And then adding another layer to that, I chose construction as my niche.
Holy
So
smokes.
Wow.
yes.
You broke down every barrier.
I mean,
every single one. That's amazing. That is Rosie the Riveter right there.
I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like
But I really felt like I could stand out, right? I could definitely stand out. I made sure I wore I have these red hills that I wore for like almost a decade, like everywhere I went, because they made me feel confident. They made me feel like red's my power color. So I was like, I'm going to put those on and I'm going to go out there and kill it. And it's so funny, after COVID, my feet couldn't do heels anymore for a little bit. I forgot how painful they are because I just got used to it and like using them. So I'd say I probably have about 20 other councils that I've done. And I'm not saying that to brag. I probably have like a serious council addiction. But the biggest thing is that when I bought CLI and took over CLI as a group, I was 32 years old. Okay. So really, really young.
Yeah.
And really for me, councils gave me an opportunity to really understand the industry in a different level. It allowed me to understand our carrier partners and it allowed me to represent CLI and help our partners at a more national level. And so the council work that I've done has been so gratifying because I've been able to make a difference, not just for our agencies, but for agencies across, the country, and also help our carrier partners really get an idea and understand what it is at the field level for agencies of what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we need, and transform, carrier councils. I'm like a big person that goes in there and I try and listen, see how they're running it. And usually I have this good or maybe bad habit of going, I can make that better. And I completely change the council so that it is very clear that there are deliverables and it's very measurable, but also there's an element of fun. Like one of our taglines is, we make insurance fun, right? So my team, I always challenge them, make insurance fun. So, so it's always funny when people ask me what councils have you been on? I'm like, okay, just go to DawnyelSmink.com and then you can see everything I've done. And it's just much easier because I didn't do it because I wanted to have that big page on my website that says, hey, look what I've done. But what I really wanted to do was to be the advocate and the voice for declaring our independence as a channel within the industry and really helping to make sure that we do it in a way that's consistent and knowledgeable and that it is something that is lasting.
I'm gonna jump in
All
because
right, Chad,
good
you go.
Lord,
Yeah, you go.
force to be reckoned with.
I know.
I can
100%.
say.
I know.
Why do you think I invited her?
I know.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Hold on.
Continue.
So how did you go though from
Go. In my
So
head again.
we've been reading each other's minds all day. I don't know where this is coming from. But
That's a skill set.
how did you go from being on all of these councils to then starting your own council? And I know that part of WISE is wrapped up in your own story of empowerment. So I don't know how much you're comfortable sharing that, but what was that transition saying, okay, you know what? I've been on them. I'm now ready to lead one.
Yeah. Leadership is taking risks sometimes and getting out of your comfort zone. And for me, I spent a lot of time trying to establish myself as a presence within the industry that was knowledgeable, that an agency owner that was credible, and not just a person that was a female, right? So I spent a lot of time trying to do that and doing it in a way that I wasn't a men's hater type of person, because I love working with men. I think they're awesome. And so I wanted to make sure that shined through. So when I decided to start WISE, I just really felt like that type of message wasn't out there. It wasn't us versus them in 2016. And I really wanted to give an opportunity to not just for women, but really a voice to those that were not being heard in the industry and not given opportunities just because of one aspect of their life, not because career-wise they didn't deserve it. So it was really an opportunity to put that out there. But I'll tell you, I was scared as hell to do it because I felt like I was going to be put into this box that, oh, you're one of those people that just want to have a women's group, and it's like you're not for men. And it was really difficult for me to get past that in the beginning. So I started it really small, and I started it with carriers because I wanted them to have the voice instead of me. And then as WISE grew and we did WISE talks, we did retreats, we've started our second workshop is this year. And I decided that I did have a voice, and it was okay for my voice to be out there. And I didn't give a flying, what, about having a judgment over me. I've gotten to a point in my life where haters are going to hate. They're going to do that, but I'm not going to let it come in. And I got to a point where I could do that. But that's a hard point. I don't think everybody gets to that point. So I decided there was other people out there that needed a WISE workshop, especially like Sid, your message on imposter syndrome was spot on, right? And then like that you had the confidence, like that was not her original like speaking topic. Like you changed it on the spot.
Right.
And you decided like, hey, I think this is what needs to be heard and felt. And I'll tell you, some of my team members were in the audience when you spoke. And they came to me afterwards and said, thanks. I never had a name to what that was for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And not only that, they had a voice and they had, two people, your partner and yourself, up in front speaking your truth, and that they knew they weren't alone. So in that essence, what we've done with WISE is to create a safe space and place for people to speak their truths. But not only that, is that to include men and celebrate the men that are helping women, when there's still difficult situations. Let's get real about it. Like there's bad behavior on both sides, on men and women.
Yeah. That
we push women down. Like my biggest thing, you'll see it on our WISE, website, is that, are we pushing people up or are we pushing them down? You got to ask yourself that. And so that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to elevate everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a difference in, and I could say this as a male, I guess, is, having women empowerment in a way of lifting women up. And then there's women empowerment of putting men down or putting other genders or other roles down. And the way you do it is in such a way that, I follow you on a lot of your socials and what you're doing. And my wife's a big fan of yours as well. And it's empowering to me as well as a male, and to see some of the things that you're doing. And I think some of that came from, going back to those councils of literally having a seat at the table with, a lot of men and women that are, in those roles. And so I just want to say kudos to you, because we all know those, inside and outside our industry of people that are women empowerment that are about putting others down. And it's not empowering at all, and so the way you do it, I'm a big fan. That's another reason why I wanted to have you on here, because I knew you weren't going to come in here and say that me and Chad were terrible. You were going to come on and say, empowering things to everyone listening. So thank you for that.
I might still be a little creepy, but that's all right.
Right.
No one heard the conversation beforehand. That was creepy. I was like, we need context to that.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so
Otherwise, I just sound like I'm calling him a name.
Right.
Well, maybe we can put in the recording of
Right.
the pre-roll. We'll put in the pre-roll right now. Okay, so what temperature check? You've been doing the WISE Council for a number of years now. What's your read, I would say, not take, but read on where the industry's at from a diversity standpoint and inclusion standpoint? Do you feel like it's gotten better over the years? Do you feel like we're about where we are, where we were? Like, what's your read?
I think that we're just starting the conversation. I think that's where we're at. I think there's a lot of work to be done still, but I feel like we can actually talk about it. And I think in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance into even having a conversation about having a group that would be willing to put that out there. And then, especially on the diversity and inclusion side of it, is really keeping that out of, your career path. Like, it's part of who you are. We're not asking people to deny who they are, but we need to recognize when we're including that in their career path in such a way that we are pushing them down. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think there's also there's some hard truths. There's some preconceived ideas and assumptions that are built within our culture that we just let be okay. And we just kind of bypassed it. My biggest tool that I would use through the years is I would use humor. Like, if somebody had bad behavior, I would use humor. And basically, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it's Chad could bleep it out if we need to. But go. I'm gonna say one here in a minute to introduce something else about you. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So to basically be able to call somebody an asshole without calling them an asshole, right? Use humor to do that, and just say hey, and use humor to get, somebody to have maybe a different thought. Like I said, I feel like the conversation is just starting. I think we're talking about it, but are we implementing it and making it a part of companies? Not truly. And I think that's where the hard truths and the hard conversations of the things that are silent, the things that are inherently built into companies that we're not talking about and we're not recognizing. So we may talk about it, but then recognizing and actually counteracting that is being totally different. So that's where I think the real work needs to be done, is where our silent prejudices that are out there that we're not catching.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to an agency owner, or a team member, honestly, male or female, who wants to have the conversation? What does that look like? But they don't know how to do it. And honestly, I think about my own relationship with my family. We're just starting to have conversations right now. They're very religious around, me being gay and how we come together as a family and what that looks like and where boundaries are and expectations. And it is hard. It is hard. And when we first got into it, it was like, I don't know, where do we start? And we ended up actually, to be totally transparent, saying, we should probably have a guide through this conversation and getting a family therapist to help out with that, which has been incredible because we didn't know where to start. It's like you both are coming into it with the right intention. You don't want to hurt each other. You want to be a family, right? You want to figure out how to come together, but starting is tough. It's like walking on eggshells a little bit. So how do you? What advice would you give people who want to have that conversation but don't know how?
First of all, thanks for your transparency in that, for the audience to hear that part of you. I love that you're able to break that down and share that. Thank you. Yeah. But I'd love to hear your answer to her question, though.
Yeah, I think anytime you come together, especially where there's a lot of emotions, it's really hard to have a clear conversation. And so you really got to clear the table. And one of my benefactors always says, attack the problem, not the person. So first, when you sit down, you clear the table and you say, we both have good intentions and we want to connect. So, and you're probably going to talk about my book.
I'm dying to get into it. You're about to go into, you're going to steal my thunder, but go ahead.
I'm totally doing that. I'm segueing for you.
I love
Like,
it.
don't project your shit. I have an exercise where you clear the table. So a lot of
This is
times
one of my
people
favorite
come to
things. I love it.
come to a conversation where you have your shit, you throw it on the table, the other person comes, they throw their shit on the table, and now the whole thing is stunk up before you even opened your mouth, right? Because of all the shit you're piling between each other, right? So if you say, let's clear the table, let's attack the problem, not the people, right? And that the clear purpose of this is to communicate, and here's our intentions. Can we agree upon that? Now, if you get to a point where it's going well and then it doesn't go well, you may have to clear the table a whole bunch, especially where there's a lot of emotions. And I will tell you, I struggle with that every single day. I have a really hard time with that when it's really heightened emotions. There's other things I can clear off quickly and I can communicate with them. But if you can't do that and you can't clear the table, then don't sit at the table. If you can't do it and it's too hard, get yourself up. Because the worst thing you can do is basically you go from throwing shit on the table to a total shit storm. Right?
I love it. And I'm going to put, just for the audience listen, I am going to put it, I guess it's an Amazon link I could put out there to buy this book or to find this book, because
It's awesome.
it's a great book. And you talked about it with me several times. And I was glad you went there. You stole my thunder, but I forgive you. It's your book. You can do that. But it's definitely a great segue to her question and a way to get into that. So awesome. Thank you.
I want to kind of add something here too, because I kind of see that she is trying to approach this whole touchy subject with real eyes. And I think what I'm seeing here is that we don't want to take things to every extreme to fix a problem. We need to figure out that there is a middle ground, and we can't be extreme in our response and in our way of trying to deal with it. And I think that that a lot of that's happening in the world today, where people are taking it to the extreme, and you're like reversing some of the hard work that people have put in.
Balance is I think it's almost easier to be extreme than it is to be balanced, because when you get closer to the middle, there's this tension that you have to walk in, where you're kind of bringing two things or multiple things together, and sometimes they feel contradictory, and there's this awkwardness, or I don't know a better word for it than tension. And the goal is to try and make it as much both and as opposed to either or as you can. And that is it's so hard. But that structure, that format that you've created, that framework is so well thought through. I mean, it's amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah. So the second book I'm writing right now that I'm trying to finish, if I can get through the layout. If you ever do a book, like sometimes layout of a book takes longer than actually writing the book. I'm in that phase. And the book is called I'll Own It. And part of it is
Wait, you didn't put a cuss word in this title? You didn't want to put another...
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, hate to disappoint you.
Right. You could have had a whole thing there.
So I'll Own It. It stands for the different pillars of owning it and accountability, which is integrity, leadership, liability, open-mindedness, work, no excuses, and truth. And the first pillar is integrity, because integrity is your strongest pillar. But the most interesting thing that aligns with what you're talking about, Sid, is that there are so many different types of integrity that you deal with. And most people only look at as integrity as being this one defined thing. And that's not true. Integrity is very personal. It's very defined differently. So you have some people where you have an aligning integrity, where you get along with them a lot. A lot of the viewpoints that you have are very, very similar. You may have a couple outlying things that you don't agree on, but for the most you do. And then you have oppositional integrity, where the hardest thing is, like you said, that middle piece of like trying to come together. If you have somebody that has oppositional integrity on a lot of the key things that are important to you, are very different than where you're at, you're going to butt heads. It's going to be really hard to stay open and go, I understand that, for you, this is important, and really listen to them without telling them that they are wrong, right? They may not be wrong. They just may have oppositional integrity. They just may be somebody that you decide that you're going to spend 20 minutes with maybe, but not like 2 weeks with, right? You're not in alignment of the integrity. So you just have to realize that is what is causing the friction, is where the integrity aligns and where it does not align, and that we make stances of you're a bad person, or they think you're, a bad person, and we go back and forth on that. But it just really means that our integrity is not aligned. So if you can think about that thought first, you'll take out the judgments of the other person, and it's okay for us to not agree. I mean, what happened to we're going to agree to disagree? Like that sentence, I think, has like completely lost its spirit out there. So that's what I talk a lot about in the book is really getting to a point where owning it is a very personal journey for everybody. And sometimes like you can't make people own it. Like you just can't. They want to own it for themselves. And sometimes owning it for them aligns with their integrity, but does not align with yours.
Right. Well, and I think that goes to the fact that we're all in a different part of our journey. I used to think journeys were very linear, and I'm realizing they're not at all. They're kind of all over the place. We're all learning different things, and age is kind of a factor, but not really. And I've learned that as I've grown up and, come back into my parents' lives. Like there are things I'm learning from them, absolutely, from their age, but there's also things they're learning from me, and it's not age related, right? And hierarchies, we make all these systems with titles and all of that stuff, and we always think, oh, well, the person above me I can learn everything from, but the person below me I can't, and that's not really true either. We're all in different parts of our journey, and so you're right that there are times of our journey where that lack of alignment is almost necessary. That I'd even go so far as to call it maybe even like selfishness is almost necessary to say like, hey, I need to go figure myself out, and I need to grow within my own space and not be not be connected to you, right? And that's okay. You want to be kind and compassionate during that period, but it's also okay to be a little disconnected. So well,
it's really hard because as children, we often tend to have adoptive integrity. We adopt our parents' integrity of the things that matter for them. And then in our 20s, like, I know I did this with my parents. I'm like, I just wanted to find out who I was. So it feels like we're rebelling against them, but we're really trying to find what integrity means to us. That's all it really is. And not adopt it just because that's what they did and that's what was expected. And sometimes we stick to that, and then you end up being super unhappy because you're never living your truth, right?
Right.
So that's like really hard to step out of adoptive integrity.
Gosh, I'm absolutely buying this book.
Yes. I will say too that one of the things that I tell my children is you've got to be true to yourself. You cannot lie to yourself in this process of growing up and maturing, and don't put yourself in a position where you are lying to yourself and then you fail even harder. And you fall on your face, and then you're like, wait a minute, but I was doing this, and you're just not being true to yourself. So that's very insightful.
Thank you, Orange Mike. Appreciate you.
But there's so much that you could unpack just in that sentence alone of people even knowing who they are and finding their own identity and where that comes from. And so that could be a whole nother episode all on its own. But, with all the different, imagining where these books came from and all the networking and all of the councils and all the agencies you manage and all of that, you have a lot of personalities in and out of your life and a lot of roles that you play in and out of your life with carriers, with agencies, with councils, with women, with men. Is that where the genesis of all of this, came from, your passion projects or your books that you're writing?
It came from a mix of personal and professional. So Don't Project Your It was all about really trying to recover from my 20s and writing the story of finding myself. And the biggest thing was I projected a lot of on myself. And that was probably the most damaging. And so for me,
find your identity.
Yeah, I was trying to find my identity. So that was more of a personal project, but also like realizing in professional situations where sometimes you just need to take a breath and go like, hey, like I've got this going on, which has nothing to do with the person that I'm going to sit across from. And so I'm not going to make this their problem. And so how do you do that? And how do you do that? And then find some grace for when you're not capable of doing that, right? So like I have a couple of different ideas in there that can help. One of them is Snicker's character of naming the person that you do not want to be that comes out when you're feeling a certain way, calling yourself that person so you don't attach that feeling to yourself as a whole, but that it was a moment. And so you can give yourself grace and just be like, oh, that was Elaine. Elaine was doing that, and that's not okay. I'm not endorsing it, but that is not Dawnyel. That's not authentically who I am. And I don't want Elaine to show up very much. It is my job to figure out how to get Dawnyel to show up more often.
Yeah.
Love
And
that.
so that's helped me put some grace to some things for myself, because we're human. Like, we behave badly from time to time. It does happen. And then I'll own it is the story. It starts off, I was writing a book about workplace accountability, and I had my oldest was a teenager, and we were very, very close. And he started lying, and he's really bad at lying. So he's really easy to catch. And
I'm the same way.
That is a good
Yeah.
problem to have.
I'm like, you're not good at this at all.
Oh, I
So good.
suck at
Lucky-
lying. I
lucky
bust it
you.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I decided that I shouldn't write a book about accountability if I didn't understand what it meant to me and what it meant to my son, and that we were in agreement of it. And so we started a journey of defining accountability. We defined it by the pillars that I talked about, by each of the letters of the words of what we decided to do to make it easy to remember. And then we studied each one. And then we got some bands, and that came from me getting pissed off one day, and we started handing them out. I was like, you're going to show everybody what, owning it is, in the nice
Love it.
mom voice. And then we handed out bands, and the real story of that for me is that it was more helpful for me than him, of really owning what I needed to in my life and then sharing it with other people. So I have like incredible stories of, sharing the bands with people. And so we still give them out. And, I wrote another book, finished it. It didn't feel right. And that was really hard for me to not put it out. And then I decided this was the book that needed to be written. And because I had done a blog with it, and, did the story of it and put it out there a little bit and talked about it and, spoke about it. But, and it's okay that sometimes we feel like we put stuff out there and it takes longer, or it's not quite what we need. It's okay to take a breath and say, I'm going to do this on my own terms and not on other people's terms. You can talk about it and still make yourself accountable to doing it, but it needs to be authentic to you, for you. Yep. And so that's one of the big lessons I learned by writing this book this time.
Well, if someone would listen to this podcast up until this point, until you said that, it might have been, and Chad was even taken aback by this, of like, she's made all the right decisions. She's done everything right her whole career, and look where she's at. But if you to be like, you know what, I wrote that, it was not a failure, but it was something that wasn't quite ready. I think a lot of people listening to this might be able to relate to that, of like, how do I get to that place? How do I recognize in that, of like, when to do this, when to not, when to make that decision, to pull the plug on something. A lot of being a good leader comes with making the right decisions and making choices and whatnot. And so was that something innate in you, or is that something you've learned as you've matured through your 20s and 30s? And won't say how old you are now, but is that something that you've matured through, or is that something you're just born with?
I think definitely matured through.
Okay.
I realized that, but I was, still am. I'm a recovering perfectionist. Let's just put that out there. So
I've never heard
really
that
I
term.
difficult.
love that phrase. Same.
Yeah,
Same.
never heard that term.
God, I love
so
that.
hard. And so have been so hard on myself. So I think that, like I said, the first book helped me understand some grace, giving myself some grace on some things, and then really realizing that it's okay to change. And go into a different direction. And it wasn't a failure. And people say it a lot, like, it's okay, you learn lessons from it. And, I have a degree in elementary education. And so for me, like, I'm a teacher at heart. So like, what was the lesson? And so like, even though it is like you're going through the suck of it when things didn't go right, and then you could go and decide, and I do this too. And I always give credit to my dad, but he always talks about stinking thinking. You can go down the path of stinking thinking and get stuck in that. And I do that sometimes. I'm very open and vulnerable about that, because I don't like having a facade about who I am. And I will tell you about the things that I do well, and I'll tell you about the things I don't do well. And so I still get stuck in stinking thinking. And then I have to tell myself, it's okay. What are the lessons? And then you change. And then you go into a different direction. So if you can't get yourself out of the stinking thinking, you never make the change, and you don't go in a different direction. And then it doesn't like make you a better person. So, but it's really hard to do, because it's enticing to stay in the suck sometimes. because it sucked. Sometimes there is nothing else you can say about it. It just sucked.
Yeah.
Especially if you couldn't control it and you couldn't change it. And the would have, could have, should have can eat you alive.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talked about this yesterday. If sometimes you just need to sit in it. And you were just talking about it. Sometimes you want to move out of as fast as you can, but sometimes you just have to sit in it. And you have to okay, this sucks right now, but I need to sit in this for a minute and figure out my next move instead of just going as fast as you can to get out of it. And so I think
we were talking about, well, okay, so that
get it.
We were talking about a specific person whose name I will not mention.
Right.
But this person has a tendency to not give themselves the freedom to sit in the suck.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from perfectionism and this desire to always be seen as someone who's the next thing, I'm moving forward. And, I think the principle is sometimes to move forward, you have to take a couple steps back and you have to embrace that suck and sit in it, because it helps you become more self-aware. We all have a dark side and shadow side. And, if all we're sitting in is the light, that's great, but you're missing out on half of your who you are as a person. Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of figure out both those sides. And I listen to him sometimes. I'm not a huge fan of this person, but I do like one thing that he says quite often. His name's Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, the most dangerous person is a man or woman who's essentially embraced their dark side and knows how to control it. Right. That's the most dangerous person. It's like, yeah, that makes absolute sense. Right. So anyways. Okay, so because we're talking about books here. I think Dawnyel's really started a new chapter. In her
look at
life.
that transition. That was a pro move. That was a pro move. I
know.
like that.
So I've
You're
watched
flexing.
I've watched her grow, CLI, Canyon Lands Insurance, and be this leader in the industry and champion diversity and equality and truly having the right conversations as an industry. And doing that so strategically, not for the fame and glory and platform, but almost like not silently, but kind of like behind the scenes, working in the shadows, like with carriers, but this force that's like unstoppable. Like you can't stop it. And now we see you making this next big move to walk into one of the largest networks that exists in the industry. I'm curious what that transition has been like for you as a person. Why people want to know why would you ever leave the insurance agency world? Tell me a little bit about what that's been like for you and where you're headed next.
Another great decision.
I think we have we're just starting to see Dawnyel all over again. It's like you just keep reinventing yourself like Madonna.
Hopefully without that plastic surgery.
Okay. That's fair.
It was a really hard decision. I wasn't looking for it at the time that it came. And so I think sometimes we have to be open. And I really had a feeling at the end of December of 22 that I needed to be open to something that was different than I had ever done before as a leader, and that I needed to keep my ego out of the way. And it was really weird. It was like this weird message in my head going into that year. And I really wanted to find a way to help our agencies with claims management for their clients, not just on the commercial side and risk management, but really we're not claim specialists as owners. When our team comes to us and says, hey, we got this claim and it's going south, that's it's like a moment of terror for any agency owner. Cause we're is the carrier handling it? And it just puts us in this awkward position because we are salespeople. We are not claims adjusters. We do not understand that side of it because that's not the side that we work on an everyday basis. And so I really wanted to solve for that problem for my agencies, because a lot of times they came to me and I could give them some advice. And then I tell them, hey, you need to go talk to your E&O carrier, which is never fun to have to tell them that. So I really didn't want to be in that spot anymore either, because I had spent 16 years in that spot with our agencies and I love to help them. And a lot of times I was able to do that and direct them in a place that helped them in their agency either be proactive on something or not be grossly reactive on something and cause it to make it worse. And so I met up with Keystone and at actually the INA is the Insurance Network Association. And we sat at a table and we talked about this. And we talked about how our philosophies of the type of agencies we wanted to work with were very similar. And we talked about, hey, would we be open to meeting up together? So they came to Arizona and we started showing them everything that we had built and worked on, and they did the same. And then we pulled up a map and it showed them all in the east and basically us all in the west. So you looked at it.
Wow.
And then this thought has been my biggest thought since that point in time. So that thought of, I need to do something different. I need to be open, changed for the betterment of agencies. Like, that is my passion. That is my love. I love the independent agency channel, and I want to figure out how to help agencies have more leverage, more help with the things that they need, and people that are worried and concerned about their pain points, but be able to do it from a bigger pool and bigger resources to help them. And so the thought from there was, for the betterment of agencies, what if we came together? What would that look like? So CLI agencies, traditionally, we would help agencies either come from a captive environment like myself when I started with the group, or we would have agencies that were existing, but they needed resources, they needed help to get to the next level. And they were traditionally, 2 million and under in revenue. We have some that are above that, but traditionally that's who we served really, really well. Keystone served really well 2 million and above in revenue. And so they didn't serve any of the agencies in our side. We didn't serve each other's sides of the country very well. They had resources that we did not have, and we had some resources that they did not have. So for the betterment of agencies, if we came together, we could serve agencies throughout their whole life cycle. From the very beginning to, if they grew to a certain size, there was different resources to help them. And then we have a wing of us that is an affiliate company of ours, that's KAP, it's Keystone Agency Partners, where if we want them to perpetuate first internally, second, we want them to perpetuate either to a CLI select agency or a Keystone franchise partner. And then if they can't do that, we'd like to keep it in the family. So we have owned and we have non-owned agencies. So KAP for us is our owned agency portion for us to be able to keep that internally within the group. But now we're meeting agencies at where they're at and providing the resources for them to get to the next level. And sometimes that next level, like we've had agencies that have come to us and their next level is perpetuation, but they really don't know how to do it. Yeah. And so we can say, hey, first we like to see, can you internally perpetuate? And if not, can you perpetuate with one of our partners? And if not, we have this mechanism over here with KAP. And so it really provided the whole universe for an agency to get the support that they needed. And on top of it, the community. I mean, you've both seen what our select agents look like. Like, it is a community. Like, we love each other.
I was going to say, so the three of us share a friend in Arkansas, actually, in Ryan Evans.
Yes.
Who,
I love Ryan.
Great guy.
Yes.
And I think he would tell you early on in his career when he went to independent, and went owning his own agency, he struggled with finding the right network. And, through, working with you guys over there, he, first of all, he found his home there. But where I was going with this before you said that was, through the transition, I've talked to him a lot about it, just checking in on him and whatnot. He was like, it's been one of the most intentional transitions for Dawnyel. And it wasn't something you took lightly, to your point. It was like she's asked for feedback. She's talked to us through it. It's been very intentional. And then with Keystone coming in, he's had some conversations there. It's been a very intentional transition, not like we're taking over and doing that. It's been like a very, I don't know what you call that, but it's been like a great partnership.
Integration of the thought process for the betterment of agencies. I mean, we decided to do things, and not just that, but for our carriers. When we were doing this, our carrier's going through a hard market, and we're like, oh, if we do these changes, this is going to be a lot of work for our carriers right now, and they really need to focus on getting back to profitability, and we need to help them. So we don't want to add anything more to their plate. So there was a lot of thought put behind it on both sides of it. I mean, any transition and integration is going to be hard because everything gets changed. And one of the things I keep telling people as we've been going through this transition is, hey, let's have a philosophy conversation about this. Because if you're attacking a certain problem, not the person, remember, that there's a philosophy behind that person. So, they may believe this portion of it in regards to this one issue or pain point, and you believe this is the philosophy of how it should go, and they're on different sides. So what you got to decide is, how do you be open to each other's philosophy, see each other's side of it, have a conversation, and then say, is there a compromise to be had here that we can live with, both sides live with, or is there something that one of us needs to bend on it? And so you have to have those clear conversations without all the emotions of it getting in the way. And so that's probably the hardest thing with any change, transition, merger, acquisition, is there is a different philosophies of how things are ran, practiced, put into procedure that you really got to work through. But when you do, and if you do it right, you actually create some really cool connections where they can speak. And their words and thoughts are being listened to compared to being shut down.
Well, I think that happens naturally when you don't force the connection, right? Like, you've been so not only very intentional and purposeful with the change and the transition, but you almost listen, this goes into, we're going to get into so much, like, spirituality, philosophy, whatever you want to talk, however you want to, define it. I think that we're all co-creators in our journey. And so we definitely, from an empowerment standpoint, we definitely have free will. It's not like we're robots just going through life, following a path that someone else set before us exactly, with every detail. I think there's a sort of co-creatorship about our journey. But there's also this other force at play that is sort of guiding or helping, and I'm still trying to figure this out personally, right? But there's definitely another force there, and that, you call it the universe, God, however you want to label that. But you've really almost listened to this synergy between the universe and yourself, and kind of walked this path organically. And I think that's what, yes, to everything, the change going so naturally and well, it absolutely, I think there's lessons to be learned at the ground level, but it started at the beginning of the conversation when you said, I didn't really want it. I just had this message in my head that said, hey, there's something that you need to look out for, and it's going to come across your path. Right. And if it fits, it fits. And as you walked that, it fit. I mean, that's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's scary, though. I will tell you, I think one of the hardest things is to let fear not be your guide, not let it always be your warning label, but let fear just be an emotion that you decide to entertain. Because there has been moments where I have had moments of fear where I was like, okay, I either entertain it a little bit too much, or I decide not to entertain it. Right. But also, like, it's change. It was change for my agency. So I was very cognizant and trying to keep it very open with them and transparent with them where I could. And then having them be able to say, hey, I'm afraid. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. How do we get you to a good place? Because this has good intentions, but I know we need to figure out how to not entertain that fear. And sometimes you have to do it together, and sometimes you battle it within yourself, but it's a choice. Like, you have to decide within change to either entertain it or not entertain it.
Well, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, but then it also goes into, it's so easy to be paralyzed by some of that, by that fear, by that change, by that, whatever it might be. And I'll be honest, transparent, I'm that way. When I get into certain situations, it's easy for me just to shut down completely, like operation shut down. and I have to fight through that a lot of my kids, my wife, people that depend on me at Vertafore. Wait a minute, Heath, wake up. I need you here. I need you in this moment. But it's so easy for people to just sit there and be paralyzed. And so to hear you say that, like, you either got to entertain a little bit but you got to move forward one way or the other, or backwards, however you want to do it. But you can't just sit still.
I want to just key in on what she said, though, because she said I used to think you had to eliminate it.
Right.
I used to think you had to get rid of it. And I'm coming to terms with the fact that it will always exist.
Do you entertain it?
And the question is how you wrestle with
it.
And how you entertain it. And that goes back to the Jordan Peterson quote, like controlling your dark side and all of that, right? It's sort of this like, you can't get rid of it. You can't, it's always fear, it just exists. So what a beautiful way to like, God, I really appreciate the way that you walk your walk in the insurance industry. I think it's truly like you are a role model to many in the way that you've navigated things.
Truly are. And I've got to, as we got to wrap up here shortly, but I do want to get into a few things here. Again, we're on a technology podcast. So I do want to get into when you've got those two forces you talked about, east, west, large, small, there's a lot that goes into that as far as, personalities at play, new services, old services, whatever it might be. But technology does play a part in this when you've got large and small agencies. Was that a conversation that you guys had? Is that something that you've seen, even going back to just CLI days of like, that's a lot of agencies that try to pigeonhole into one piece of technology. So how do you work through that from a network? We have a whole department at Vertafore for networks and associations, and we try to wrap our head around how can we serve the best to our capacity in that many roles and agencies. Where is that coming from your side of it? I know it looks like from our side. What's it look like from your side?
Well, we want it to be the least impactful to the agents. Internally, though, there's a lot of technology that does have to come together. And that was really hard because we are learning new systems, but sometimes we have some things that we're doing well. And so we were able to bring those to the table. So then they're learning some new things too, right? And we're learning each other. And we're learning each one's communication style. We're also learning how we may be using the same technology and we can bring it together, but we may be using it very differently. And so having really deep conversations about how it comes together, it can be hard. And it's hard to have the change. Like for a while there, was my outlook a disaster? Yes, it was. Was it the IT's fault? No, it's a lot to move over. It just is and I understand that. I think that makes it a little bit easier on the technology side. Like I understand that technology can be messy at times, but you can work through it. It's not like it's like messy and you're dead. We have this saying in my office, but did you die? And we say that because you didn't die, right? But we can make it work still. And is it frustrating? Yes, get it out of your system and then let's move forward. So, that was very difficult. One of the things that we like to do for our agencies, and Albert on our team is really awesome, is that we look at their tech stack. We have somebody look at their tech stack and say, do you have duplicating systems? Does it make sense? We're actually a huge advocate for, which you'll appreciate because you guys are a management system, is really using your management system to its fullest. 100%. I think it's so ridiculous. And they're like, hey, I have this and it doesn't integrate with my management system. And I'm like, but your management system has that component. Have you tried that? Because then you don't have to pay for something extra. You don't have to worry about, APIs. Use what you got first. And we don't use it to our fullest. I always say this all the time. I'm like, do you have technology ADD? And if you do,
love it. Yeah,
let's medicate you. Let's get you medicated. Because it's so ridiculous. That's the big part about technology is that it's awesome.
Yeah.
If you use it properly, if you don't use it properly, it is an expense. And then they have certain feelings about that technology, which is not are you going to embrace and entertain the fear of it? No, you shouldn't, really dig in deep what you got. So do that. But also don't also blame the technology for the fact that you're not digging in deep and you're paying for it. It's not the technology's fault. It's the implementation. What is your, I have a whole worksheet this is the absolute teacher in me. It is laminated.
Nice.
And so you can use dry erase on it, right?
Yeah.
And erase it. And it's all about, like, I did a talk about it. It was innovation to implementation. And how do you actually do that with anything? And so there's this whole grid of this process that you can use with your team all the time of how do we do that within, certain time frames, and how do we measure it, and what are the things we're going to need to make sure this is successful? How do we know what success looks like if we implement it? So we utilize that to make sure that we have a good foundation of how this is going to go when we implement technology or a process or a system, and that we go into it knowing what the outcome should be, where we also allow for room to pivot. We also allow for room to have people have voices. If you do not give voices to your team with technology where they get an input and a say, your adoption's going to be crappy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. 100%. One of the things as we wrap up a little bit is we talk about networks on our side, your side, like insurance podcasts, they're growing the amount of networks out there. But what I'm hearing from you, and there's a handful of others that are like you in this, but it's not just about market access anymore. A lot of times in the early days of networks, it was just about, I'm going to join this group to get get access to markets. Now you guys are providing so much more.
Yeah.
And obviously you said it earlier off air, you said, you're trying to help agencies leverage new services and whatnot, but from continuing on this technology part, part of the conversation of like, what does that look like for you guys? And is that, again, I know it's an intentional thing, but it is about more than market access. And I know you're a big fan of networks, obviously. And so can you talk to me a little bit about what that means and what it means to be a part of a network and how important that is?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, you create the feeling of not being alone.
Yeah.
Being an agency owner, it's a very lonely journey. And I've been on it, and so I can say it from my own, right? And so to have other people that understand your journey and can help you through different spots, I think that's first and foremost, is that, and some of them have done different parts of the journey that you have yet to take. Yeah. And so being able to go, hey, can I get like basically a cheat sheet to how this went for you? And being vulnerable to how it went wrong is really important. But if you're not on the same team, it's really hard to be vulnerable. And so I think being in the same network, you have an opportunity to have people that are on the same team with you. So that helps a lot to create that vulnerability capabilities between two people. So I think that's number one. I enjoy that. I love it that our agencies talk with one another. Even if they're frustrated, that's fine. Guess what? You're like 100% of the time, you're not going to be like, Dawnyel's awesome. There's going to be some time where you're like, you're not happy about something, but I'm still awesome. Right. So it doesn't change my awesomeness. It just changes like that there we have an issue we need to clean up. That's all it is. Like, I'm not going to take that personally. Right. Like that's like, it's usually not about me as a person doing something. It's about something didn't go right. And now we got to figure out, can we fix it? Do we flush it, out? Do we decide that we're going to move past it, even though we can't fix it? Like that's important, that part of it. So I think with the network, it's the services that you can provide. We have a wealth of them now. We have some of the IT services. We have our vendor relationships that we have that we manage and we help them with, and help an understanding of how agencies have used that technology. I think that's really important. And then on the other aspects is we help with carrier relations. We help understand what's happening within the industry, and you get like a big overall arching idea of that. I mean, one of the things that I loved that we put together for our team at CLI is that we have a page called Hard Market Helper, where it's one page for you and your team to have everything from, some of our agencies helped share what emails they were putting out to their clients to help them understand what was happening in the market. So we had templates for them and that they could cheat off of them. More cheat sheets. I love cheat sheets. I think or Cliff Notes. Like, I think maybe that's the teacher in me, to help people understand what needs to happen. And we had resources to help them also with, changing maybe over from personal lines to be more commercial. I mean, we had a ton of stuff in there. So I think having a network is important, but having a network that's willing to say, we're going to evolve and change as the industry changes so that we can support you in a bigger capacity. It goes right back to what I said of the whole reason why I did Keystone was to the betterment of agencies. Yeah. Like, we could stay how we are and never change, but we could also become extinct.
Yeah.
So let's just figure out how to be a lot more proactive on things and really help each other out in a sharing capacity.
Yeah.
So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, it feels like what you're defining is networks going from being a way to get access to carriers to really being like an insurance Sherpa. In a way, right? Being a guide or light to agencies through a lot of different challenges and roadblocks and issues, and being kind of a forum or a place they can go to solve for those.
Yeah.
This is huge.
It is.
That's a lot more responsibility for a network today than I think in the past.
Yeah, I would agree. You want to take us home? You want to close us out here?
Oh, you're gonna give me the?
Yeah, dude.
I have I have the talking stick.
Yeah, get it.
Okay. All right. Well, Dawnyel, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Just your leadership in the industry, your courage and bravery early on to start an agency, to build a network, to champion a cause, and the consistency and drive with which you've kind of taken those things, I want to say across the finish line, because I feel like you're starting a new chapter now. But we're excited to see where you go next. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface still on what Dawnyel does in the insurance industry. So we'll keep a close eye on you. For those of you who want to follow Dawnyel's journey, you can find her on LinkedIn, of course, buy her books on Amazon. Is there any other way that people can get in touch with you, maybe if they're interested in CLI or Keystone?
Yeah, just my first and last name, DAWNYELSMINK.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's it for today. I can't believe we have to close. I could probably spend another hour or two talking to Dawnyel and hearing all about the many topics that she is an expert in, but we must wrap. So before we go, make sure that you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you don't know that we have a YouTube channel, go and check it out, youtube.com/Vertafore. We call it Channel Orange. And, check out all the amazing recordings. You get to see Heath and I, which is way better than, if you think our voices are great,
right?
Heath's voice, very sexy. Now just imagine being able to see him in person, right? On the YouTube channel live. All right, guys, with that, we'll see you for the next one.